In 1947, Hooker Electrochemical bought Love Canal in Niagara Falls and filled it with toxic waste. Within the next 6 years, the canal held 25,000 tons of hazardous waste. 3 years later, the Niagara Board of Education offered to buy the canal, but Hooker refused. Hooker later accepted the offer and the canal was sold for $1. The history of the canal as a toxic waste site was fully disclosed to the board, and Hooker claimed to be not liable for any further costs. Hooker stated the site was not safe for anything except a playground and the ground should not be dug up. Settlements and sewer systems were built on the new area. A school on 99th Street was built to support the growing population in Love Canal. Love Canal was a brand new area with lots of open land, yet the board built the school right on top of the site, knowing the history of toxic chemicals because it was only $1. In the spring of 1975, heavy rains flooded Love Canal, causing the canal to overflow, bringing the chemicals to the surface. Residents noticed noxious fumes and tar-like black substances oozing into their basements. Plants turned black and died, and some pets died too. Basements sank into the ground and children had rashes and chemical burns from playing outside. The EPA tested the contaminated groundwater and found more than 80 toxic carcinogens. Local officials did not take the issue seriously and even mocked residents' fear and took little action. Higher rates of miscarriages, stillbirths, birth defects, chromosomal damage, cleft palate, extra fingers and rows of teeth, retardation, nerve damage, and liver disorders were very clear in residents living closer to the canal. Officials suggested that pregnant women and young children leave the area immediately, but very few families could afford the cost of moving on top of the lack of buyers for their homes. Homeowners felt blindsided due to the fact that they had no knowledge about the history of Love Canal. Lois Gibbs, a concerned mother, confronted the school board with notes from doctors stating that her son should be transferred to a new school after linking her 5-year-old son's sickness to the chemicals near the school. Gibbs stated, "I did not know about Love Canal. Nobody told me when I bought that ideal home in the ideal community that there was 20,000 tons of chemicals underneath the school my son would be attending." The school board turned her down and responded saying if they moved one child because the chemicals caused illness, they would have to transfer all the students, shutting the school down. The board would not make a change caused by one irate mother. The canal residents created the Love Canal Homeowners Association, the LCHA, with the goals including evacuation, protection of the property values, and fixing the canal. One mother stated, "I hate my life at Love Canal. It is a strange life that I lead now. It is filled with disruptions, frustrations, sleepless nights, and a grip of fear that only those in similar situations can understand." President Carter used emergency funds to buy the houses closest to the canal. In 1978, those residents were evacuated. The repair of the canal began. The cleanup was estimated to cost $250 million. 2 years later, a second evacuation was implemented. Hooker offered $280,000 despite still denying liability. There was much dispute over who was at fault for the crisis at Love Canal and who should pay for the cleanup and evacuations. Superfund, a $1.6 billion fund for the cleanup of thousands of toxic waste sites all over the nation, is the most expensive environmental legislation. Under the Superfund law, the U.S. District Court ordered Hooker to pay for the cleanup and evacuations, but Hooker rejected and responded the board knew about the history yet still purchased the land. Hooker still paid $129 million to New York State. Legislation passed stating citizens' right to know the history of where they live. Carter calls Love Canal one of the grimmest discoveries of the modern era. In 2003, the EPA declared Love Canal under control, and families returned and new families settled in the area. Many said the studies conducted were mishandled, exaggerated, and not reliable. Several researchers say the illnesses were not linked to the chemicals but to pollution from New York in general. Love Canal is symbolic of all unregulated dump sites. Grassroots activists brought the issue of hazardous waste to America's attention through Love Canal.